In this video, I'll be offering you my thoughts on the much anticipated Viltrox 56mm f1.2 Pro for the Fujifilm X system. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video. This time around, I'll be offering you my initial review of the brand new Viltrox Pro series lens, the 56mm f1.2. Now, this lens marks Viltrox's first serious attempt at the classic portrait focal length for APS-C sensors. Now, of course, they've had the aging 56mm f1.4, which in terms of image quality was quite mediocre, and then they had the tiny and light 56mm f1.7 Air, which is aimed at a very different crowd. Now, this lens belongs to their Pro series, so we should expect the very best that Viltrox has to offer in terms of image quality, autofocus, and build quality. Now, as with the other lenses in the Pro series, this is not a small and light lens. Now, before we get into the details though, Viltrox did send this lens over for testing. I do get to keep it when this is all over, but no money has changed hands, and Viltrox didn't ask for anything from me except for a timely review on this channel. Now, the word timely is key there, and that's why I'm calling this my initial review. I've actually only had this lens for a little over 10 days at the time of recording, and most of that time has either been work for clients or it's been pouring rain here in Seoul, so I've had less time than I would really like to test and get a feel for this lens. So this isn't really what I'm going to call my in-depth and long-term review, but this lens is very much in line with the rest of the Pro series, which I own both the 27mm and the 75mm at this point, so I've got a good handle on this series of lenses, and I feel confident in sharing my experience with this one as well. So if there's anything I need to add, I will make a follow-up video, but for now, this is my experience with the lens. The build quality of the Pro Series lenses from Viltrox is excellent. The fit and finish are absolutely premium in every regard, and just like the other lenses in the Pro Series, this one has a full metal construction, and it also has seals to prevent dust and splashes from getting into the lens as well, and a rubber gasket at the mount to help stop anything from getting inside the camera while you're working too. Now, with the storms we've been having here in Seoul, I didn't want to take any camera equipment out in that rain, but so far, dust, sweat, and a few raindrops here and there haven't been an issue at all when working with this lens. There's also a large manual focus ring on this lens, and it is buttery smooth for those of you who still like to work with manual focus on focus-by-wire systems. Now, if that's how you like to do things, you'll probably be quite happy with this one, but as for me, I really wish that Fujifilm would allow us to assign these focus rings to some other function on the camera as well. Now, of course, as with the other Pro lenses, there's a physical aperture ring here, and as with those lenses, it's a little bit looser than most of Fujifilm's ones, and it can get knocked in your bag. The clicks are also not quite as definite as Fujifilm's ones, and it can be a little harder to know how many clicks you've moved the aperture ring without concentrating really hard or looking at the aperture in the viewfinder. Just like Fujifilm's XF90mm f2, this lens uses a floating element for focusing, and just like that lens, it's a little disconcerting to hear your lens elements rattling when the lens is powered off. Now, of course, they're designed that way, and there's nothing wrong with them, but I've never really been able to get used to my lenses rattling. Even the ridiculously expensive GF110mm f2 does it, and it just doesn't sit right with me. Other than that though, there's not much to talk about. The build quality lives up to the Pro moniker and is absolutely premium in every regard. Autofocus with this lens feels every bit like the other lenses in the Pro series. Once it engages, it's absolutely rapid. AFS just snaps into place before you can even notice it moving, and the tracking is superb. Overall, the autofocus, as you can see here, is exceptional. It snaps to the focus point extremely confidently. Having said that though, just like the other Pro lenses, the engagement can take a moment to kick in. If you half press the shutter and then release it before the system gets a chance to lock on to something, it basically just resets to where it started, and the whole process needs to be repeated. This process is extremely noticeable with this lens and with the 75mm f1.2 because the focus rack is just so long. You need to give the autofocus system a moment to gain confidence, but once it does, it's absolutely excellent. Viltrox's voice coil motors are great, but it does feel like occasionally they just need a little moment to wind up before they get going, and that does occasionally lead to some issues, which we'll talk about in the upcoming In the Field section of the review. Sharpness in the center of the frame is quite good. Perhaps it's a little softer than the XF56mm f1.2 RWR, but we'll compare those directly in another video. By the time you stop down to f1.4 though, sharpness is much better, and from f2 and onwards, it's excellent. Corner sharpness follows very much the same story. At every aperture, corners are ever so slightly behind the center of the frame in terms of sharpness, but not by enough to worry about. They're only a hair softer, and I wouldn't hesitate to put things that I want detail in right out in the far corners of the frame, especially when the lens is stopped down a little. From f1.2 all the way to f2.8, there's a mix of what looks to be coma and astigmatism towards the edges of the frame. So, if you're looking to shoot small light sources, like street lights or stars with this lens, it definitely pays to stop it down to f4 or beyond. Purple and green fringing are noticeably present with this lens. In my testing, it's a little more significant than the XF56mm f1.2. Still, this is par for the course with extremely fast lenses, and it's not something that I'd complain about. Wide open, there's a 1 1/3 stop vignette in the far corners of the frame. This reduces to 1 stop by f1.4, and then again to 2/3 of a stop at f2. From f2.8 and onwards, it's a barely visible 1/3 of a stop. Well done on this one, Viltrox. In my testing, bokeh with this lens has been very, very good. Now I'll do some direct testing against the XF56mm f1.2 RWR and the Viltrox Air 56mm f1.7 in an upcoming video, but for now let's look at this lens in a vacuum. At f1.2 and f1.4, we see a little cat's eye towards the corner of the frame and nice round bokeh in the center. After f2, the cat's eye effect disappears, but the bokeh remains nice and round thanks to the 9 aperture blades. So things are looking good so far. This trend continues when we see some out-of-focus foliage rendered by this lens. To my eye, this looks great, and I'd be happy to work with this lens for portraits in a park, for example. If we move to a more complex scene with lines here, there, and everywhere, again, the lens does a great job of keeping things fairly smooth and jitter-free. As I said, we'll do some direct comparisons in an upcoming video, but for now, I don't see anything obnoxious at all in this rendering. We should expect that from a Viltrox Pro series lens though. They're known for their nice bokeh. If you want sunstars from a short telephoto, this is not your lens. They're almost non-existent at most apertures, and when they do show up, they're quite mushy. Flare and ghosting with this lens are quite significant. Now, honestly, it wouldn't be my first choice for working in backlight. With any hint of the sun in the frame, all sorts of flare and ghosting appear, depending on the angle and position of the sun. Looking at these samples on screen, you should be able to get a feel for what I'm talking about. If working in strong backlight is something that you do often, this may not be the right tool for the job. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I've only had this lens for around 10 days now, but I've taken it absolutely everywhere with me and put in a couple of dedicated outings to shoot some street photography with it. Now, given the similarity to the other Pro lenses, I feel confident that what I'm sharing here won't change with further testing. So, onto the lens. The first thing I noticed when I copied over my initial images from this lens was that, much like the other two Pro Series lenses I have, it brings a bit of that coveted three-dimensional feeling to APS-C images. Now, this is one of the things that I love most about the 27mm f1.2, and I'm glad to see it present in this lens as well. Unlike the 27mm and 75mm, at least to my eye, this one isn't quite razor sharp. It's still plenty sharp enough for a short telephoto, and even stopping down to f1.4 brings it in line with some of the sharpest lenses that you can find on APS-C systems. Still, when I've been photographing things that aren't brick walls, I haven't really given a second thought to my aperture choice. It's been purely about depth of field and whether or not I want to keep that three-dimensional feeling that you get from working wide open. As I mentioned, I have noticed from time to time that the autofocus system doesn't seem to spring into action quite as quickly as Fujifilm's XF56mm f1.2 RWR, especially when it has to move the elements significantly. When the lens only has to move the elements slightly, it's lightning fast, and once it locks on in AFC, it doesn't let go and it tracks brilliantly. However, it can just take a moment to get started, and I found that a little frustrating at times, and I just found myself missing moments that I wouldn't have missed with the XF56mm f1.2 as I waited for this lens to rack through its focus range. Now, this week I did have a government event to photograph, and I did take the lens along with me for that. Now, once I had all the images I needed for the event using my regular Fujifilm kit, I took a quick 2-minute lap around the room with this lens just to get a few frames and see what it was like to work with in the demanding situation of a corporate event, and how my images would compare to my regular XF56mm f1.2 RWR. Now, here's the thing. Aside from the extra weight of this lens, that little bit of hesitation in the autofocus system, a tiny bit of extra chromatic aberration, and the lack of automatic vignette correction, there really wasn't a difference through the viewfinder while I was working. I really didn't notice that I was using a different lens. It performed really, really well. Unfortunately, because I don't have permission from the guests at the event, I can only share images without faces. But even from this simple frame of a wine pour, you can see just how nice the rendering of this lens is. The images are plenty sharp and the bokeh is smooth, so if you can get used to the different way that the autofocus works, I can't see why this wouldn't be a good alternative as long as you don't shoot into backlight all that often. And that pretty much echoes my walkarounds with this lens perfectly. It's a lens that gets out of the way in most situations and just lets you make photographs, and that's a good lens in my books. I think I've covered everything here, but this is another Viltrox lens that gets my strong recommendation. Images are sharp, colors are pleasant, even though they're a little bit different from some of Fujifilm's lenses and you have to match them if you're using both. The vignette is well controlled, chromatic aberration, coma and astigmatism aren't wonderfully controlled, but they're not terrible either. Autofocus is very good once it gets its morning coffee in, and the only major downside I can see to this lens is the flare and ghosting control. Those you definitely need to be very careful with. At $580 US, this comes in at just over half the cost of Fujifilm's flagship lens and offers pretty much all of what that one does. Now, I would say that for most people, there's not really much of a difference between the two, and the extra money is probably not warranted for the Fujifilm lens. For those who work professionally and demand the absolute best from their lenses in all situations, the superior coatings and the slightly sharper images of the XF lens may be worth the money, but otherwise the Viltrox is a great option for most people, I think. Viltrox also has a 5% discount being offered for the first week after launch, so if you'd like to take advantage of that, I've got some links to several places where you can order the lens below. Whether or not this is a lens for you, I hope you've enjoyed the review and the photos so far. Please do let me know if you have any questions about this lens in the comments below, or if there's anything you might like to see in an upcoming comparison video. For now, enjoy the slideshow and thanks for watching.